Football Index pitches itself as the stock market for football players online. Now, over time, many of you guys have asked about this. I haven't really been able to comment because I didn't know a lot about it. The last 2 weeks, I've spent more time looking at Football Index, wondering if it's something I want to put my own money into, and also that I can provide further feedback for you guys on a logical level. Now, I'll be completely honest with you, there's 5 things that I've found which really concern me about using Football Index at this point in time. Hopefully that will change in the future. I know that there's a very passionate community around Football Index, and so a lot of you guys, if you're already invested and you've already got money in Football Index, you might not like this video. However, you know, I like to tell things as it is, and the only thing that I can promise you as a viewer in this video, because it's going to be longer than usual, I will provide, you know, logic and my view and understanding with something solid behind each point as we go. I'll also explain a whole plethora of things about Football Index and how it works for people that might not understand some of the nuances as we go through this. So if you're looking for a particular thing, please check out the description down below. We'll add some timestamps to this video. If you click on the timestamp, it will skip you ahead to that point in time so you can look at that particular topic. So let's get on with it, starting off with the first thing that really concerns me about Football Index and makes it a no-go for me on a personal level. So what are you actually doing when you use Football Index? How does Football Index work? Well, as I said previously, they pitch themselves as the stock market for football players. So they have a share system whereby you can buy shares in a player. They will pay out dividends over a period of time, more on that in a moment, and you have the potential to sell the player's shares, and depending on whether the price goes up or down, how much dividends are paid out, you can potentially end up in profit. Sounds like a great idea. I do think that it is actually a good concept. I think that there's a lot of people that'll be interested in it either way, and there has been in the past already, but there's something highly concerning about this. So first of all, when you buy shares in a player on Football Index, it's not linked to anything tangible. If you buy shares in a company, essentially you're buying, a small share, a piece of that company. And so there is something physical linked to it. Now, when you buy, say, shares in, I don't know, Ronaldo, you don't get a little bit of Ronaldo's foot. They're not actually linked to anything. So if you look at the terms and conditions on Football Index, what you're actually really buying is a 3-year contract on dividends, okay? And I think that many people who have already put their money in Football Index, having looked around online, don't even actually understand this. So when you buy a 3-year contract on this particular player for this particular price, Football Index gets the money, you get the shares, and then you get paid out dividends based on what will actually happen in the future. All well and good, great. With the view of, and if you look at Wikipedia, with the view of you can also make money through capitalisation of selling the shares if their price should increase, and obviously if their price does decrease then you have to take the loss also, which is where the term trading comes in. Now there's several big problems with this, this one issue, and that is, first of all, how do you price a player on Football Index? Well, a large part of that factoring for the pricing is if you are able to sell the shares, which is something that I'll probably talk about a little bit later on in this video as well. But as people have found out already, you can't necessarily sell the shares. So if you buy a 3-year contract in a player and you're looking to take this seriously and you want to do it from the angle of making money, which is the whole reason that people would even come onto the platform, you need to do this because you need to understand how much dividends are likely to be on that player over a period of time, because it needs to be the price of the player and some, so that you actually make sure you get some value in terms of the dividend payout over the 3-year period. Hopefully I haven't lost anyone there, it makes perfect sense. Now previously, up until earlier this year when coronavirus actually hit, as I understand was when this changed, you had the option for what they call instant sell. So when you buy the shares, you're buying it off of the company Football Index. Now, previously, there was an instant sell button, so there was also a price where you could sell the shares back, but you would be selling the shares back to the company. So they'd come into circulation and they'd go out of circulation. Okay, and you'd buy at one price and you'd sell at another, and obviously there would be a spread between the two different prices. But when coronavirus hit, they decided to take away this instant sell button. So they flipped over to what they call an order book system, which is very much like other exchanges, whereby you can sell your shares, but there needs to be somebody else on the platform that wants to buy your shares in order for you to sell them. So liquidity aside, we'll talk about that a bit later. This obviously created a massive problem. It also meant that a lot of prices went down because people wanted to sell their shares and there just wasn't the demand for people buying it. So in order for this to work, the company needs to have enough liquidity in circulation, enough shares in circulation, enough demand, and hopefully also be growing all the while in order for this to be something that you can use in terms of the capital sense, the capital gain, aside from the dividends. So if you're pricing a player on Football Index, what I'm saying is you have to make sure that the dividends are going to pay out more than the cost you pay for the shares over the next 3 years, and some for it to be worth your while, which is a very tough ask. Obviously this massively changes the whole situation, and when they removed that button, that massively changed the value of people's portfolios, as they call them. And I notice a lot of terms from shares and the stock market have slipped in with this, but really that's not what it is. You're buying a contract of bets over 3 years. You're not buying a share in anything. Okay, so and like I said, I'm not trying to upset people. There'll be people watching this that do have a fair sized portfolio, as they call it. They'll have a lot of shares on Football Index, and the thing that I would say to you is actually they're not worth anything unless you can sell them. It's a bit like having an odds on bet over the space of 3 years, but there's no guarantee that you're going to get your stake back that you put in the first place. So with all that said and done, let's come on to dividends, which is the second point, which I find quite concerning. And that is because the overall dividend terms that you can find on Football Index in their terms and conditions, so this isn't something I've made up, this is factual, and given the fact that it's very relevant to the pricing of your shares, we call them shares, but basically the betting contract, is how the dividends actually work on Football Index. So you've got 3 types of dividends on Football Index. You've got match day dividends, you've got in-play dividends, and you've got media dividends. So these are all dividends that the company, Football Index, will pay out to you based on the shares that you hold, depending on what actually happens in those 3 different situations. So I'll very briefly explain what each of those are and how they work right now, just so we've got some context as it comes on to making this further point. Okay, so first of all, how do media dividends work? So as I understand it, media dividends were the original type of dividend which were paid out by Football Index before the other ones were added. We'll discuss those in a moment. So how do media dividends work in Football Index? Well, first of all, every day Football Index scans 20 different news sources for players' names and various words attributed to those names in those articles, all taken from an RSS feed. Okay, so for example, you might have Paul Pogba header mentioned in an article, and so he'll score a certain amount of points because his full name was used in the article, as was the word header. Now different words, sort of goal, stuff like that, will have different amount of points. So then they build up the points for each player, all done via algorithmic work to give you a score, and then they pay out a dividend for first, second, and third every single day per share on the particular player. So once you can understand all of that, I don't think it's that complicated, although getting there isn't that easy, and there are a number of problems with this. So first of all, the article has to be in the RSS feed. So if it didn't end up in the RSS feed from one of these news sources, then it doesn't get counted. Okay. Also, if the full player's name is not in the article, so for example, if it said Pogba, then it wouldn't be attributed, and so he wouldn't get the points, which raises a very large problem because a lot of different players have very different names. For example, you have Jordan Rose. Okay, now a common word to use would be Rose, so part of his name is actually a common word anyway, and some of these different footballers only often are referred to as one name. For example, Ronaldo. Okay, so there's a bias between the different types of names. If it ends up in the media sources, the RSS feeds, and the different words that are attributed to them inside those articles. But basically that is how media dividends work on a daily basis. So the next type of dividend that we'll talk about will be in-play dividends. This type of dividend is far more simple. Basically, there's just points attributed to various actions within the match and you get paid out. So for example, if there's a goal, you get a penny. Okay, per share, that is. So obviously the more shares you hold, the more you're likely to get paid out. So there's no real qualms with in-play dividends. They're quite simple. The only drawdown on in-play dividends is they're only valid for 30 days from the day, including the day that you purchase the player's shares or betting contract. So for example, if you buy a player on Friday afternoon, scores later on that afternoon, you get the in-play dividends for that day and up until 29 days after you purchased them. Okay, but they're probably the most simple form of dividends on Football Index to understand. Now, the last one that we're going to cover is match day dividends. So these are probably the most complicated out of all of them to understand, or I'll break it down as simply and quickly as I possibly can for you. So match day dividends on Football Index work in the following way. Now, there's different levels of match day depending on how many matches are on that particular day. So they pay out different levels of dividends if it's a bronze, silver or gold match day. So for example, Saturday afternoon is highly likely to be a gold match day. There's loads of matches on, it's very competitive. Earlier in the week, it might be more quiet, and you might find it on a bronze match day. So they'll pay out less dividends for the particular players that score on those match day dividends. Okay, now further to that, players are categorized into 3 different sectors. So you've got forward, midfield and defense. Okay, now what we're looking for is the top 3 players in those sections. So you could have a gold match day on a Saturday afternoon. The top forward will get the highest payout typically for that particular match day. Okay, so for it to be a match day, obviously they need to be playing that day, and depending on how many matches are on that day, we'll specify how much the payout is. Broken down into the 3 different categories, goalkeepers go into the defenders category. These type of dividends are valid for the full 3-year contract from the point at which you buy the shares. However, you need to purchase the shares before 3 p.m. on that particular day to qualify for that day's match day dividends. Okay, so a hell of a mouthful there, but we've overviewed the 3 different types of dividends there, because now I want to come on to something that's very important about these dividends, which is still my second point, and I find highly concerning about using Football Index from a user's point of view. So all of these dividend types, whether you think they're too confusing or not is one thing, but they are subject to change at Football Index's discretion within 30 days. Okay, so they can just say, look, we're changing the dividend payout. We're going to pay out half the amount of what we used to pay out, and that will come into place from 30 days from now. Now you might think, okay, that's fine, because I'll just flog my shares because I didn't price my player based on having half the amount of media dividends than previous. But that goes back to the first major concern that I've already raised there. You can't necessarily sell your shares, so you are stuck with some shares where potentially, and I'm not saying they are because I don't believe this has happened just yet with Football Index, although it could do in the future, they just massively, drastically cut the amount of dividend payouts. Okay. Also, equally as concerning, within their terms and conditions, they say that they can change the game rules at any time. So they can change, the criteria for which these dividends qualify, all that kind of stuff. Again, you'll have a 30-day period whereby it's sort of like cooling off and the change is taking place. But within those 30 days, you think if they do that, what's going to happen? Everybody's going to try and sell their shares, and unless Football Index is growing at a phenomenal rate, there's not going to have the demand in the marketplace for other newer punters to buy the shares back off of you, because instant sell is no longer there, and Football Index are not buying shares back off of the users. So that is quite concerning. And then there's one other thing which a lot of people probably won't have thought about, and I believe this has happened in Football Index's history, although it's quite a while back when they were a lot smaller, is what if there's a career-ending problem for a specific player, what happens with the shares and the dividends from that point onwards? Now, one example was Emilio Sala, obviously had the flight crash, passed away sadly, and everybody who had shares in him, I think they may have got paid out, and like I say, this was a while back, but in their terms and conditions, it basically says, well, they're just worth nothing then, and you're just not getting dividends. So your money is dead money again. So they're the main concerns for me in terms of dividends, how dividends work, and the different types of dividends when it comes to using Football Index. Bearing in mind, if you're going to price a player, you need to be able to do it on dividends, and there just can't be all of these variables. It's not a case of, I bought the dividends at this point in time, and therefore for the next 3 years, because I've bought this contract on this player, the next 3 years, that is fixed, and that is not going to change. That is not the case. It can change at any time. Now, the third major red flag for me has to be around the issuing of dividends on Football Index. So I've explained in the previous points how it works there. Obviously, they issue the shares, users buy the shares, and then hopefully users will buy and sell the shares between each other if there's enough liquidity, and you can either make a profit on the capital gain if the shares go up and other users are willing to buy them off you, and vice versa, along with the dividends too. But whilst looking around, I see that it's quite often that Football Index do what they call minting new shares. So basically that means they're bringing new shares into circulation on their exchange, because that's what this is now, with the order books of people buying and selling stuff between each other. So they're adding shares into circulation. Now, on a very basic, simple level of trading online, no matter what you're trading, anything, it's all about supply and demand. Supply increases, demand goes down, demand comes up, supply is lower. So, the scarcity, the fact that there is less shares in circulation and people want to buy them, is what drives the price up. Simple factor, you can't argue that. So when Football Index mint new shares, which basically means they're putting more shares in circulation, they're just creating more shares. They are diluting the marketplace. So they do this when the price goes up, I'm led to believe from the parts that I've read online there. But when there's extra demand, say for example, a player becomes very popular, you're expecting all these extra dividends, his price is going to go up, everybody wants him, so the price starts to increase because there's more people, there's more demand for these shares, and there's not enough supply because they are scarce. There's only a finite amount of them, and then Football Index start introducing more shares. Who wins out of that transaction? Well, the existing people that already hold shares lose out because they don't get the inflated price, because Football Index increase more shares into the marketplace. Obviously, Football Index are taking money out of the marketplace by introducing new shares into the marketplace. The new users obviously get the shares if they're willing to buy them at that price. But overall, longer term, it creates more of a problem when you want to come to sell shares as well, because there's now more people holding shares. So you've got more competition to sell shares against when it comes to selling time. And basically Football Index are the victor in this situation. And again, unless they are growing and they are increasing the amount of liquidity day on day, week on week, month on month, more and more people, then it just makes it harder for you to sell your shares further down the line. Those people, again, got big portfolios sat there, it's fine, I'm in it for the long term. You're basically betting on the company. If the company doesn't survive over a longer period of time, then you're going to lose. At the end of the 3-year contract, your shares are going to expire. They're going to be worth nothing. You're going to get your dividends whether they change over that period of time or not. But as they can constantly issue and bring new shares into the marketplace, Football Index are profiting from the capital gain, and they're stopping the price from going up for its existing users who have already put money into their platform. So I find that highly concerning. There's obviously a lot of variables and a lot of things that can change by the looks of this, which really puts me off putting my money in there anyway. But one of the biggest concerns is, just continually increasing the amount of shares into the marketplace. Now, as I've seen and what I've looked about online, I can't see anywhere where they actually list the amount of shares that are in circulation, particularly on a specific player. Now, if you want to price something, you want to know how much is in circulation, you want to know, if the demand's going to increase, what's going to happen. So I find that a little bit worrying that you can't see all of that. Maybe that's something that they can improve on. I think that probably would put off a lot of people as well and make people sell shares if they could see that at certain points, which is probably what Football Index don't want. But the issuing of new shares and the amount of shares that are in circulation is a concerning factor for me, which also means that I wouldn't put my own personal money into it. So moving on to the fourth point that concerned me, and this is an overall concern for all betting companies online, something that you should all be aware of. We've got a separate video on the channel, we'll put in the link somewhere or whatever, but basically how safe are your funds? So from what I've seen there, Football Index is registered in Jersey. We can't see the company accounts, so we don't actually know if they're doing very well and whatnot, but they only offer a medium level of protection for player funds. Now, if you read the Gambling Commission website, they say that basically each firm gets to choose what level of protection they are. They do a few checks. It sounds like they don't go quite so deep, but there's 3 different levels. There's no protection, which means if the company goes under, so do your funds in there. There's medium protection, where it says, the company says, there's stuff in place for some customer funds which might be held in separate accounts for customers to get their money back. Okay, it's very vague, the medium level there. Or there's higher level protection, which you'll see with the far bigger, more reputable betting companies online, whereby they say all player funds are taken, they're kept in a third-party account by an independent third-party body that has control over it, and if the company, in the instance that the company goes under, then players will get their money back. So Football Index does not fall into that higher protection bracket. They're in that kind of middle grey area a little bit, where there's no guarantee that if you've put money in there and they go under, that you'll get all your money back. You might get some of it back. I don't really know. Couldn't tell you the ins and outs on that. And like I say, stacked on top of that, it's a little bit more concerning that, because they're not listed in the UK company, you can't actually see the ongoings financially, what's happening with Football Index, and even really have any kind of idea if you know that they're close to going under or if they're massively thriving. I mean, they could be doing either. I really don't know. But again, it really massively puts me off putting, 10, 20, 30, 50 grand into a Football Index account so I can buy and sell some shares, do some trading, try and make some extra money, if there's no kind of solid guarantee of that higher level protection whereby they say, if we go under, you get your money back. That is not there. So that's something to be aware of. Onus is on you as a user if you want to use it after knowing that information. So the 5th point that really concerns me about the Football Index platform is a universal problem which all exchanges have experienced over a number of years. I've been highly aware of this, having been quite closely aligned to other betting exchanges and firms in the past, been invited to a few different events, heard people talking about different stuff, and that is overall liquidity, as existing users are already finding out. So if there's not enough liquidity in circulation, and there's not enough demand for the product in use, and there is demand for the product because it is not a bad product, it's a good idea, like I said earlier, then the marketplace is not fluid. Now, on top of this, I find it slightly more concerning with Football Index that the way a lot of these things are structured and geared up, it's actually designed for you to put your money in there and hold your shares and keep your shares over a longer period of time. That doesn't incentivize the user to continually buy and sell and trade their shares, swapping back and forth, increasing active market liquidity. So, that's the type of thing that tightens up the spreads between the buy price and the sell price. It obviously gives Football Index a bit more commission because they charge commission on the selling portion of your betting contract, and it incentivizes customer trust, because I think if they're going to succeed over any longer period of time, that's really what they need to do and focus on here to have maintain substantial active liquidity in their marketplace. Now, looking at it already, it doesn't look like there's a lot of liquidity. It looks like there's plenty of people waiting to sell their shares, as you may expect over a period of time, having had that build up, and there's not enough new customers coming in to buy those existing shares, which is probably an overall problem, because essentially the new customers are the ones that are paying for the old ones. So if they don't maintain a level of growth or increase growth over a period of time, or stop introducing new shares into the marketplace, then basically the supply outweighs the actual overall demand. So whilst we're on that quickly, with liquidity, supply and demand is a massive issue. It's the issue for all the exchanges online. There's 3 things that I see as a problem with that. Maybe a bit of feedback for Football Index, if they're even seeing this and thinking about trying to change things into the future. So the first one is obviously issuing new shares and minting new shares. You're diluting the marketplace. You're making it a weaker marketplace for people to be active over a longer period of time. I appreciate over the short term that might create some cash flow problems for them as a company. I don't really know. Obviously, introducing new players onto the platform via the IPOs. The more players that you have on the platform, it's a bit like with alternate exchanges like Betfair and BetDAC and all the others. If there's 500 markets to choose from on one particular football match, you end up with 500 weak markets. You don't end up with one strong match odds market. Okay, so that is a problem I know that the other exchanges have faced in the past with various things. People obviously want selection to choose from, so it's a tricky one to weigh up. But as you continually add more and more players, you're spreading your existing customer base liquidity over more and more players, diluting the marketplace, making it harder to maintain over a longer period of time. On top of that, there's new competitors coming to the marketplace. I noticed another one called Sports Stack. I haven't really looked at them yet, but you need to plug that gap in liquidity. Liquidity is a massive issue, and it will stop particularly your power players, your bigger players, the people that are probably going to be the underpinning core liquidity of the platform coming along or even hanging around into the foreseeable future. So overall, I know that they've had a lot of problems over the last year. Coronavirus has probably made things a million times worse for them, and some people are very concerned, I think quite rightly so. I certainly wouldn't be putting a penny of my money in there yet. But will they recover? I don't really know. I hope they do. I hope that they take a few bits from this if they do see this, or various feedback from other people. If there's anything throughout this video that's been slightly off point, slightly wrong, then please comment down below to correct it. I've done plenty of homework checking these things, so I don't think there's anything wrong at all. There might be a couple of little bits that people can add in extra, so please do down below. Just to summarise then, the 5 points that really concern me and keep me away from it. First of all is the whole fact that it's not actually a share, it's just a contract on 3 years and it will expire at the end of the 3 years. Secondly is the dividend payments. Great idea, but if they can change at any one period in time and I can't sell my shares, then that just counts me out by default. On top of that, diluting the marketplace and adding in new shares, not showing customers how many shares are in circulation, how many are going to be increased, if any are going to be taken out of circulation, when they're due to expire, etc, etc. That affects pricing, so it makes it impossible to price anything on the platform, so therefore I can't use it. Also, the protection on the level of customer funds, slightly concerning, being medium, and it being in Jersey offshore, so you can't actually see if the company is doing very well or not. I mean, they could be growing really fast, that could be great, but that doesn't necessarily show the underpinning financials of the company. And finally, the overall liquidity, which is the biggest problem for any exchange online, particularly in the betting sector where it's far smaller than the marketplaces like Forex. So hopefully you found this video useful for everybody watching. I'm sure there's going to be some people who disagree. A lot of people that have probably got a load of money in there might have a slightly biased opinion. I know people get passionate and upset. It's all around football, and football is a very passionate sport too. So please keep it clean, but let us know in the comments what you thought down below. And please, if you found this useful on any level, or you learned something, or it's it's kind of put you in a better position to make a decision afterwards, consider tapping the like button down below and subscribing to the channel. We've got some other useful football videos on the channel, so check them out in the end screens here and here. Thanks for watching. I look forward to talking to you in the comments.